Fox News Network's audience at any given minute. But unlike television viewers, most visitors to my site came because they believed I had something unique to offer them. They trusted me. Blog is a book about trust, how old media, mainstream media, lost it, and how new media is gaining it. At the Republican convention, I had an opportunity to interview for my radio show 3 of President Bush's most senior political advisors, Karl Rove, Matthew Dowd, and Karen Hughes. In addition to these Republican operatives, I interviewed Democratic National Committee Chairman Terry McAuliffe and was interviewed by lefty radio host Al Franken. I had all of these interviews transcribed and posted them at HughHewitt.com. Excerpts from all of them were picked up by scores of other bloggers and zipped around the blogosphere, changing the perceptions of tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands, of the convention and the presidential race within which it was a milestone. Every other blogger there and the tens of thousands of bloggers who weren't but were writing and analyzing the events were doing the same thing. Millions and millions of words were being written and read by individuals with no or limited connections to old media. Every previous political convention had been dominated, in many respects shaped by old media, a consortium of left-of-center television networks and big newspapers, with the big 3 weekly newspapers thrown in. I am confident that no single member of old media interviewed the 5 individuals I've just named on air, and even if they did, their conversations with the ones they did meet were not transcribed in real time. People who trust me read my interactions and my questions and got unfiltered information from the president's side and a good dose of hilarious and ineffective spin from the 2 lefties. They will return, these readers, as they have been returning since I launched the blog in early 2002. Since then, I've had more than 10 million visits to my site. I am one of thousands of blogs, though one of the larger ones when it comes to traffic and links to other blogs. Why does this visitor traffic matter? Because the visitors to my blog are a symptom of information users on the move. Information habits are all smashed up. First cable news, then the online versions of old media, and now the blogs have followed one after another in the space of a handful of years. Each has crashed into the established habits of information acquisition, each time setting free millions of information users. MTV had done the same thing to the music business 20 years ago, and entertainment changed in an eye blink. Now news and information are undergoing the same radical transformation. People's attentions are up for grabs. Trust is being transferred. If you or your business, or your faith, or your family depend upon the steady trust of others in you, your institution, or your product, suddenly you are at sea. If you don't know this, you are in the position of General Motors or Coke when television arrived. 2 years ago, I would have sold a lifetime ad on my site for a couple of $1,000 to defray the startup cost. At this writing, it is $1,000 a month. Given who reads the site, that is cheap, and it will go up soon. Marketing is in a new age. It is actually much more radical than that, but the language of consumption and advertising is well understood. What is really going on is an information reformation similar in consequence to the Reformation that split Christianity in the 16th century. The key to that Reformation was the wide dissemination of Scripture among the increasingly literate laity. Today we do not have a canon, but we do have an appetite for information, the arrival of a new technology of distribution, and a million willing content providers. The old guard of old media is in a situation very similar to the Roman Catholic Church's situation when Luther arose to challenge the Pope's authority. Once Luther's spark set the fire, the availability of editions of the Bible made the collapse of the Church's authority inevitable, although the struggle was long and often bloody. The collapse of old media's authority isn't going to be bloody, but it sure is entertaining as the self-appointed tell the self-anointed that it is all very, very bad. What will happen without editors and producers, they wonder. Exactly what is happening and will continue to happen. Free markets of information are driving decision-making in politics and soon will drive consumption decisions and institutional reputations. The ground is shifting so quickly that it is impossible to overstate the impact, even as it would have been impossible to overstate the consequence of the arrival of television. This book is the result of a conversation I had with the publisher of my most recent book, If It's Not Close, They Can't Cheat, Crushing the Democrats in Every Election, Thomas Nelson Publishers, Jonathan Merck. That book had done quite well, having appeared for 6 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list for nonfiction and reaching number 6 on Amazon. In the course of discussing my plan for a series of books, not including this one, I explained to Jonathan my theory of what the savvy publisher would be doing right now, which is developing a blog about books that became a must-stop in the world of reading and selling and buying books. I would find the best 1 or 2 writers among the publishing world's many fine scribblers, brand the site with their names or a great blog name, and pump resources into blog ads to let the blogosphere know that a new blog was in town devoted to books. Then I'd start running blog ads for that publishing house's own books and buzzing that publishing house's own buzz. In short, I'd build the means of production of sales, which will be driving book sales somewhere in the near future. There is a New York Times review of books in blog form coming, maybe 2 or 3. It would be best to own it. The key is speed. Once the habit is formed, it will be hard to shake because time is so precious in this day and age. I visit thousands of blogs a year, but only a handful daily. That handful list is hard to change, and as with me, so with millions. There is a race underway to gain mindspace, to be a part of the blogosphere reader's habit. The bad news is that some of us have a couple of years head start. The very good news is that the growth curve for the blogosphere use is enormous, which is why you have to read this book very quickly and distribute it to your senior leadership, then hold a few days retreat to discuss what is going on. I have made it short so that you can absorb it on a plane ride or a couple of hours closed-door time, and so that it is relatively cheap to acquire the necessary copies. When you go on the retreat, spend the extra bucks to bring along 1 or 2 or even 3 of the bloggers from the very large A team. I will charge you a fortune, but others are not so expensive. There is value in the conversation, even if no experienced hands are along, but why convene a meeting to discuss music and leave all the composers at home? Although I am thinking of my audience as senior and mid-level executives in business, government, the arts, the church, especially in politics, if television affects your life, the blogosphere will as well, and probably already has. Even if you're a week away from retirement, you will still want to leave a copy with your replacement as you head out the door, a sort of advance, I told you so. A word about the scoffers. I hear them every day, every day. They think they have the internet figured out. They have a strategy. They don't see the sales. They don't care about the amateurs. They even blog a little themselves, and they don't get the big deal. The best word they have is triumphalism. Quote, a little too much triumphalism in that point of view, the scoffer will say. Well, John Kerry was probably a scoffer once as well. If he ever had a chance of being president, it ended not with the appearance of Swiftboat Veterans for Truth and John O'Neill's book, Unfit for Command, but with the jump from a book and a few stories by outside of the mainstream sources to a credible, detailed, sophisticated assault on Kerry's truth-telling brought about with regard to Kerry's excellent adventures in Cambodia tales. This was done by the blogosphere, specifically Instapundit's Glenn Reynolds, Tom McGuire at Just 1 Minute, the gents at Powerline, John Hinderrocker, Scott Johnson, and Paul Mirengoff, Ed Morrissey at Captain's Quarters, me, and a few others. We forced the story out farther and farther into the information mainstream, even as old media resisted covering it. When Fox News' Carl Cameron finally reported on the controversy over Kerry's very specific, very emotional, and very fictional accounts of his Christmas Eve spent in Cambodia in 1968, the Kerry campaign was obliged to recant those stories, and then all of Kerry's many fables were on the table. He never recovered from an August spent hiding from the vets, their ads, and a relentless inquest conducted fairly and with lawyerly thoroughness within the blogosphere. Kerry joined the New York Times ex-editor Howell Raines and the Senate Republicans' ex-majority leader Trent Lott as men who never knew what hit them. This trio was in turn joined by Dan Rather and the CBS team at 60 Minutes 2, which got blown away by a blog swarm when Rather's team offered up fraudulent documents as evidence of President Bush's service record in the Texas National Guard. These brief histories of these 4 episodes, what I call the founding myths of the blogosphere, are within. But understand from the beginning of the book that the crippling of Kerry, the ruin of Rather, the exile of Raines, and the demolition of Lott occurred because of bloggers. It is that simple. They are powerful men either wounded or even driven from powerful positions by relative unknowns working around the clock in text, but not in print. If people like Kerry, Raines, Rather, and Lott can be humbled by the blogosphere, so, too, can you, your company, your movie, your church, your anything. And matched to that destructive energy is a parallel but only dimly understood creative energy as well. This will fully arrive when the new geography settles and the new trusted bloggers emerge out of the scramble. Imagine the foresight of Robert Moses when it came to laying out Central Park, of William Paley as he set out to build CBS, of Gates and Microsoft, of Billy Graham when he figured out that crusades could work to change the world. The blogosphere is evolving at an incredibly rapid pace, and a lot of the best mind space is being claimed, but there remains incredible opportunity among hundreds of millions who have yet to figure out that there's a better way to gain information than by watching the tube, quicker, more specific, more emotionally satisfying. The blogosphere is about trust. CNN lost the trust it once had, and its fall has been sudden and shattering. Fox News is trusted by millions, so its numbers have shot up, much to the dismay of lefties who don't understand why viewers would trust Fox News. If you can get this point, you will get the blogosphere. None of us have time to understand everything, so we have to trust surrogates. When it comes to medicine, we understand this completely. When it comes to finance, we sort of understand this if we have trusted a broker with our money or an insurance salesman with a policy. When it comes to drafting a will, we trust the lawyer involved. The list goes on and on. People don't trust the old media with anything like the old level of confidence. There are plenty of books out there that explain what happened, but it basically comes down to the left-leaning ideology that was always there and increasingly became so widespread, transparent, and arrogant as to repel